The broadcast of the regular meeting of the Heritage Preservation Commission will now begin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this live broadcast of our virtual meeting of the October 13th, 2020 regular meeting of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. This meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. For the record, my name is Madeline Sundberg, and I serve as chair of the Minneapolis Heritage Preservation Commission. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify presence of a quorum.
Bjornberg.
Present.
Fritz.
Present.
Howard.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Sandbolt.
Present.
Stady. Sundberg.
Present.
Vandereyck.
Here.
That's 7 members.
Thank you. Let the record reflect we do have quorum. With that, we will proceed to our agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for this meeting. We will work from the agendas that are available online. I'll go through the agenda and sort out which items will be continued to a future meeting, what items will be discussed, and what items will be put on the consent agenda to be approved and recommended by staff without further discussion. Item number 4 is the Milwaukee Road Depot, 300 Washington Avenue South, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. That item will be discussed. Item number 5, 4736 DuPont Avenue South, Ward 13, Certificate of Appropriateness. That item will be discussed. Item number 6, 24 3rd Street North, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. This item will also be discussed. And item number 7, 1500 Jackson Street Northeast, a National Register nomination, will be discussed. So the proposed agenda is item 4, 300 Washington Avenue South, item 5, 4736 DuPont Avenue South, item 6, 24 3rd Street North, and item 7, 1500 Jackson Street Northeast will have staff presentation, public comment, and commission discussion and action. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the proposed agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there a second?
Sandbolt, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
Vandereyck.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. Our next order of business will be to approve the minutes from our September 29th, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Fritz, so moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. Is there a second?
Sandbolt, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Yeah, okay, it just keeps spinning. I've tried to reboot.
Sandbolt.
Refresh it multiple times.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
Vandereyck.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Before I open the hearing to public comments, let me summarize the process for conducting the public hearing in the virtual format. The process for the public hearing is as follows. We will take each agenda item in order. First, planning staff will present its report and commissioners may ask questions of staff. Then we will hear from the applicant and commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. After that, I will open the public hearing and we will invite public comment. We will begin by taking speakers in the order they pre-registered, if there are any. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. We ask that after your name is called, you state your name and address for the record and then proceed to your comments. After we've completed any pre-registered speakers, we'll see if there are any other speakers in queue who may have called in. In order to activate your microphones, you'll need to press *6 on your phone. So again, we'll take the list of any pre-registered speakers in order and then open the floor to any other speakers who may be in the queue. We ask that speakers provide their name and address before making their comments and press *6 to activate their microphone. Please keep your comments to the specific application that is before us today. After the public comments are complete, I will close the hearing. Commissioners will deliberate and then act on the applications before us. So, our first discussion item is item number 4, the Milwaukee Road Depot, 300 Washington Avenue South, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. And the staff report will be presented by John Smalley.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is John Smalley, and I'm here to present a Certificate of Appropriateness to remove a portion of the chimney at 300 Washington Avenue South, the Milwaukee Road Depot and Freight House. Next slide, please. This is a 3-story Renaissance Revival building shown here in the background, designed by prominent Chicago architect Charles Frost, located on a 2-block site bounded by Washington Avenue South, 3rd Avenue South, 5th Avenue South, and 2nd Street South. The buildings were constructed between 1897 and 1899. The depot is the last remaining major railroad passenger depot in Minneapolis. It was listed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1978 and locally designated in 1979. The local designation includes both the interior and exterior of the property. The applicant proposes to remove the top third of the 150-foot tall freestanding chimney that you see in the photo before you. They'd like to cap the remainder of the chimney and reuse serviceable bricks in future repairs of deteriorated portions of this chimney. Next slide, please. The current chimney is not the original chimney, though both it and the original chimney are considered historic. The original 75-foot tall chimney, which you can see in plan form here on the right, was constructed in 1899 and replaced by the current chimney, constructed in 1912, on the left. Next slide, please. The current chimney is a 150-foot tall with 14-foot diameter base chimney. It tapers to 6 feet in diameter, about 10 feet below the top of the chimney, and then flares back out to 7 foot 6 inches in diameter at the cap. It's composed of non-standard sized, buff-colored, curved brick set in gray or tan mortar. Next slide, please. The applicant notes that the chimney is approximately 12 inches out of plumb and leaning to the north-northwest. Some masonry debris has fallen from the chimney in the past. Fortunately, this only resulted in vehicular and property damage, and no one was injured. Following the reported damage in 2019, emergency repairs were performed to remove any remaining loose mortar and fill voids with a soft mortar to slow deterioration until further assessment and treatment could be performed. There are varying degrees of masonry deterioration around this structure, with the majority being at the top 50 feet of the chimney. The applicant reports that there's significant spalling of brick, with approximately 30% to 40% of the brick requiring replacement. There's also some mortar deterioration. The lower 100 feet of the chimney, proposed to be retained, is in better shape, but still needs repairs. Next slide, please. The chimney appears to have been fully repointed in the past with a mortar high in cement content, which is harder than the brick and has caused some spalling of the masonry units, as you can see in the photo before you. The owner believes the work was completed as part of the redevelopment of the site in 1999, when the Heritage Preservation Commission approved the property owner's redevelopment of the entire two-block depot site. At that time, the proposal included plans to rehabilitate the historic depot and freight house, to construct 2 new hotels on the north half of the block, and to build a parking structure, 2 levels of underground parking and 1 level of at-grade parking between the train shed and the hotels. New features included an indoor water park and enclosed skating rink. There have been numerous alterations since, and those are listed in the staff report. Next slide, please. The applicant has requested several continuances in order to have more time to review the staff recommendation and the basis for the denial recommendation to determine an appropriate response. They've since identified an approval to reconstruct the top 10 feet of the chimney in 1999 and researched the chimney's original use, which was to exhaust the Milwaukee Road Depot's boiler. The applicant also had another engineer provide a peer review of the originally submitted structural report and to provide a proposal for additional structural testing and fact-finding, but the owner decided not to proceed with additional investigation at this time. In terms of public comment, staff has received 1 comment letter in support of the proposal from the neighborhood group, and that is found in your staff report packet. Next slide, please. In terms of findings required to approve a certificate of appropriateness, staff finds the alteration is not compatible with the designation of this landmark. Few structures communicate turn-of-the-century industry like tall smokestacks, designed to remove fumes from the streets of cities clouded by smoke generated from year-round combustion, necessary for everything from heating to cooking. While Minneapolis boasted the nation's first centralized use of hydroelectric power in 1882, the problem of smoke remained so great even in Minneapolis that the Milwaukee Road elected to double the height of their chimney in 1912, a mere 13 years after constructing the original 75-foot tall chimney. Next slide, please. In terms of compliance with local guidelines, the Milwaukee Depot Site Development Guidelines do provide flexibility in determining the chimney's future, but the top 10 feet of the chimney was authorized for reconstruction in 1999 in the midst of a massive redevelopment of the entire site, demonstrating both the applicants and the Heritage Preservation Commission's belief in the feasibility and importance of appropriate repairs to this structure at that time. The proposal does not comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Removing the top third of the 1912 chimney is not necessary to continue using the site for hotel and reception or meeting hall uses. The chimney could be repaired as it was in 1999. Removing the top third would falsely give passersby the impression that the chimney never exceeded 100 feet in height. The 1912 chimney is a highly recognizable feature of this site, and it does have distinctive construction techniques and examples of craftsmanship that can and should be repaired rather than removed. Next slide, please. The destruction is not necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition on the property. The structural engineer's report submitted by the applicant notes no compelling reason to reduce the height of the chimney. And there are reasonable alternatives to the demolition. In particular, the chimney could be repaired. For these reasons, staff's recommending denial of the request. I'm available for any questions you may have, and I know the applicant is on the line and wishes to make a presentation as well.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions for staff? I don't see any at this time.
Sorry, I was talking while on mute. John, when they are talking about removing the top 50 feet, this is Commissioner Johnson, sorry, let me get on camera. Are they going to maintain the flare if they were to do that, or would it just be capped off at I guess 100 feet? Do you know what the plan was? I glossing over, I didn't see it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Johnson, the latter is correct. They would just be capping the chimney at the 100-foot mark. There wouldn't be any, reconstruction or attempt to create a flare at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions for staff? Okay, I don't see any at this time. Thank you, John. So with that, I will open the public hearing. I believe the applicant is here. If you could press *6 to activate your microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening.
Hello? I heard you for a moment.
There we go. Now I'm completely unmuted. This is Melissa Christensen Ekman with Miller Dunwoody. Address is 100 South Washington Avenue, Suite 500 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55401. I am speaking on behalf of CSN Corporation, and Peter Coyle will also speak briefly after I go through the slides that I have submitted. So to start with, we want to reinforce what Mr. Smoley had indicated. We did present the project, the proposed partial demolition, to the Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association, and they did approve, and they included a letter, which Mr. Smoley included in the staff report. There was one item that John had mentioned that I do want to correct, and I believe it was misstated in the National Register nomination. The original chimney was actually only 60 feet tall, not 70 feet tall, based on the original documents that we were able to view. If you want to go to the next slide, I did include a comparison between the original 1899 blueprint along with the 1912 blueprint. And as Mr. Smoley had mentioned, the top 10 feet were rebuilt in 1999. One of the questions that the commissioner just asked regarding the flare at the top, we did decide and had extensive conversation about how to proceed with that and opted not to recreate a flare so as not to create a false sense of history by adding that at a lower point. Here's a historic image that shows the original 60-foot chimney in composition with the original tower. The original tower was 175 feet tall. And in 1941, if you want to advance a slide, in 1941, wrong way. So while I wait for the slides to catch up, there was some storm damage in 1941, which had impacted the original clock tower. And so that clock tower now remains at approximately 130 feet above ground and was historically taller than the chimney. The current documents for redevelopment for this site had indicated that nothing taller than 120 feet is to be constructed, so that it's the chimney, or excuse me, the tower remains at the tallest height on the site. So currently as it stands, the chimney is actually the tallest at 150. By removing that top 50 feet, it would actually lower it 20 feet lower than the existing tower. So that historic comparison between the clock tower height and the chimney would be more reminiscent of what it was historically. As John had mentioned, the top 10 feet of the chimney had been reconstructed in 1999. What we don't know is how much that was leaning at the time. If you want to advance the slide. So we don't know how far it was leaning at the time that it was reconstructed. It's assumed that at some point in time between 1912 and 1999, there may have been some of this additional lean. We are observing, as John Smoley had mentioned, more deterioration at the top of the chimney and the top 50 feet, we're seeing more falling of brick, we're seeing more mortar deterioration. There's metal straps that were installed at some date that we don't know that are also rusting and contributing to the deterioration. If you could advance the slide. The lower 100 feet, as Mr. Smoley mentioned, is in much better condition. However, we do anticipate that there's still approximately 10 to 20% that still need brick replacement. And in our current climate, unfortunately, we just don't know when or how we'll be able to get a matching brick and how close we'll be able to get it, and if it could be cost effective to get brick to replace at this lower section of the chimney. We do know that it's a custom size, likely custom color. Our thought process was that if we were able to take down that top 50 feet, we could still retain material on site and reuse that to repair the lower half of the chimney. Could you advance the slide, please? So while Mr. Smoley is correct, there is a lot of repair that could be done. The one thing that it doesn't correct is that lien. And that lien is and continues to be a liability concern for the owner, which is why we're presenting this option to take down just that top 50 feet where the lien is most prominent. We do believe that because we have the original blueprints that are very clear about what this original chimney looked like, that at a future date, should an owner choose, that top could be reconstructed to match its historic appearance. I did include some slides with some modified images that would show what that chimney would look like with the top removed. Again, we would not be recreating that flare because we did not want to create a false sense of history. You can advance one more slide. So there's still a prominent view of the chimney above the train shed from Washington from the south. I guess technically it would be the southeast in this corner. And we do have another image in the next slide, also showing the chimney and how it would be viewed in juxtaposition with the clock tower from the southwest on the last slide. And from here, then Mr. Peter Coyle will take over talking on behalf of CSM.
Thank you, Peter. If you could press *6.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to hear us out. I'll do my best to not duplicate Melissa's comments. The format makes it a bit tricky, but we'll do our best. So by way of introduction, commissioners, my name is Peter Coyle. I'm a lawyer at Larkin Hoffman, 8300 Norman Center Drive, Bloomington, Minnesota. This application really frames a policy question for you. And in simple terms, it's how much is enough? Mr. Smalley has documented from his vantage point the record that relates to the site itself. Melissa has amplified on that. We've tried to provide photographs that depict sort of the before and after image for the primary purpose of trying to convey to you that we are not seeking to diminish. In fact, we think we are preserving the historical integrity of the site in the manner in which the plans present. But I want to start by saying that CSM has been and continues to be a really proud steward and owner of the depot property since its purchase from the city back in 1999. And since that time, with city support, it has made a dramatic renovation of the property that all of you are familiar with. It continues to be a proud asset of CSM, which has required, frankly, tens of millions of dollars of private capital beyond the support that the city has provided, as most recently evidenced by the parapet repair work that Mr. Smalley has documented to the tune of about $2 million. The entertainment space that was recently built out, I think in 2017, to the tune of about $10 million. Those are real dollars. They're dollars that the applicant has chosen to invest in the project, and we're not complaining about that. But in this one instance, with respect to the chimney, we are raising respectfully a complaint to the degree that staff chooses not to support the application. And again, I say that very respectfully, of course, because we understand where Mr. Smalley's coming from. But I want to just remind all of you of the record that underlies this site. First of all, the federal designation of the site, which dates back to 1978 approximately, makes no reference whatsoever to the chimney. No discussion at all that I could identify. The subsequent city designation of the site, again, makes no substantive reference to the chimney as either a significant feature of the site, unlike the depot and the train shed itself, and in fact only holds it out as a subject for further discussion, which I guess is why this application seems to make sense. The city design policies, as Melissa noted, actually advocate keeping other structures on the site below that of the main tower. And while admittedly the tower was the subject of an alteration that was caused by a fire, as I recall, nonetheless, that policy is there. And in contrast to what Mr. Smalley's staff report points out, I think it's important to note that while he may interpret the site to have the chimney being a character defining feature of the property, nobody else called that out as part of any of the documentation that led up to the designation of the site. And so while we're not diminishing that the chimney is part of the historical character of the property, the preservation of the chimney, even in its modified form, will ensure that that legacy remains. The primary objective is to ensure that the chimney is safe. And even if it's not at risk of falling down, which Mr. Smalley made reference to, the fact that it continues to be a hazard to pedestrians and vehicular traffic parking in and around the site is an ongoing and severe concern. And beyond that, the chimney requires constant, expensive maintenance. And so it really begs the question that I started out with, which is respectfully, how much is really enough? If the chimney itself is not central to the historic designation of the site, contrary to the depot building and the train shed, and in fact, our plan would not remove the chimney, but would preserve it, albeit in a modified form, it seems to us that it's a very reasonable policy request to seek the support of the HPC to give CSM some latitude to use its resources as it sees most appropriate to enhance those pieces of the site that are most valuable based on the designation, while also preserving those elements of the site, including the chimney, albeit in a modified form, that will allow it to be representative of what's been on the property since the inception of the depot back in the 1800s. And as Melissa noted, and as Mr. Smalley noted, this is the replacement chimney. This isn't even the original chimney. So contrary to Mr. Smalley's contention that modification of this chimney would somehow be a distortion of history, there's already been a distortion, if you want to use that word, and that's my word, not his. So it seems to us that there's honest room for debate here. Again, we're proud of the site. We're willing to spend substantial sums to maintain the site, and we have continued to do so. But we think that the better policy judgment for the city would be to allow CSM to make this adjustment. It's still going to be spending substantial sums to retrofit and renovate the balance of the chimney, including through the use of brick that it will salvage. But that's a project by itself. And even having that work completed, as we know, is no guarantee that there won't be more work required to maintain the chimney into the future. So I'll stop there, commissioners. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your indulgence. I apologize for the informal format that all of us are required to follow here in making these comments to you. But we do close by urging you to work with us to strike a balance that allows the historical educational aspects of the depot site to be preserved as they are today, with admittedly a modification to the chimney, which none of the technical documentation for the history of the property calls out as anything more than, at best, I would say, contributing. And there are many contributing factors on the site, not just the chimney, certainly. So I'll stop there and I'll be happy to respond to any questions if you have any for me. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicants? Commissioner Howard.
Hi, thanks for the additional information. I just wanted to get some clarification. The claim was made that this modification would be more historic because of the earlier chimney design, but this is the chimney that was there when this property was listed on the National Register and when the property was designated, correct? The earlier chimney is gone, so we're not trying to bring it back to a certain point in time. This chimney is the historic fabric that was there. And I guess I also have a question related to that. Has there been any discussion of reconstructing the portion that's coming down?
I'm not sure who that question's directed at, but I'll take the first pass. And Melissa, if you're available, you could certainly step in. Commissioner, respectfully, as I look at the staff report, the period of significance that noted is 1800 to 1899, and then generically beyond. And as we know, the original chimney was constructed in the 1800s and then replaced in 1912. So, sure, I'm not going to ignore the fact that the chimney exists today and existed at the time that the city's designation of the site was processed. But it's notable, at least to me, that there's no reference at all in the technical analysis of the property by both the city and the federal applicants as to the chimney itself. And so there's an inference to be taken there, which is that, in my opinion, the chimney is a secondary factor at best. Yes, it's a visible one, but it's not the dominant feature by any means of the site. Certainly the tower is that dominant feature, if you want to call one out. And the city's own documents argue for having structures built around the property being below the height of the tower. So it's a factor, and we understand that there may be reasonable disagreement about that.
Thank you, Peter. Melissa, did you want to weigh in on that? I'm not sure if she's still on the line or not.
Well, another part of my question was, has there been any discussion of reconstructing the third that's being taken away, similar to what was done in the documentation that was provided with today's application related to the top 10 feet? So has there been discussion of reconstructing the portion that's being proposed for coming down?
Commissioner, this is Peter Coyle again. In Melissa's absence, I'll respond. To my knowledge, there's been no discussion. The proposal would be to remove the top 50 feet to renovate the balance of the chimney. But the retention of the plans would allow for a future owner, should they choose to rebuild it, to do so, which we think would be in keeping with the federal standards. But the goal of the applicant, the owner, is to do what he can to avoid the expenditure of literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on a fairly repetitive cycle now, apparently, to maintain something that's secondary to the site.
Thank you very much.
This is Melissa. I've been able to unmute. Sorry for the delay. Peter did capture the comments very succinctly. We did previously discuss an option to rebuild it. However, from a cost perspective, it wasn't an option that the owner had wanted to pursue at this time.
Thank you. Are there additional questions for the applicant? I don't see any at this time. Thank you both for your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much.
At this point, I will open this up. I don't believe we have any additional registered speakers in the queue, but if there is anybody who wished to speak for or against this application, if you could press *6 on your phone and wait to hear the recorded message and to activate your microphone so we can hear you. Is there anybody else on the line? Doesn't sound like there's anybody else. So with that, I will close the public hearing on this item and open it to commissioner discussion. Are there any concerns, comments, thoughts on this application? I realize this is a bit of a tricky one. Commissioner Howard.
Yeah, thanks. I understand the concern about the chimney. The structural analysis that has been done seems to me to say that there isn't a major issue with it structurally right now. So that kind of puts us in a bad position. We can't just say, oh, of course, it's falling over, we need to take it down because we have structural information that's saying that it's okay. I'm very concerned about this concept that you can restore the history by taking it down and making it shorter. This is the chimney that was there when it was designated. And we all know that designations, whether they were national registered designations or local designations back in the 70s, were done completely differently than we do today. Periods of significance, as we know them today, did not exist back in the 1970s. So we would be looking at this today as a property that has a history that goes well beyond the dates that were mentioned in the presentation and into the 20th century. I think this is a character defining feature of the site. I think it would be horrific to lose it. I think that the commission did the right thing, or staff did the right thing, and the commission did the right thing back when they had the reconstruction done on the top 10 feet. I would feel completely differently about this if they were proposing to do a reconstruction. It's a significant part of the site, and I don't think that I can agree with demolition at this point. I haven't seen anything that would allow me to say, yeah, it makes sense to take it down.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. I have to agree, looking at the structural report on it, that I understand that it can be disconcerting to see something out of plumb like this. But the structural analysis seems pretty clear that at this point it is stable, and that maintenance and I think they recommended doing another laser scan in several years to make sure that it hasn't moved more out of plumb. That there are repair methodologies at this point that can be used to stabilize it. So I agree, Commissioner Howard, that the case just hasn't really been made at this point for the deconstruction. Although I also agree that if they were planning to deconstruct and then reconstruct part, as well as or do repairs, that either of those would seem more feasible to me. Are there other commissioners with thoughts on this application?
This is Commissioner Sandbolt. I just want to express that I agree that I don't think that the structural analysis necessitates the removal of the portion, and I think that repair is probably a direction we would like to see pursued, especially considering, like Commissioner Howard said, that the period of significance, there's somewhat of an argument there, but I do believe that this feature is something that's prominent of the site, that when they designated the site, they were probably taking into account all of these features, including the chimney, despite the fact that it was not specifically called out.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Commissioner Bjornberg?
Yeah, I'm just going to sound like a broken record now, in that I agree with everything that's being said here, and that I do think that the chimney that we see now is really a feature of this building, and I would totally support the reconstruction of it. But again, I don't think that the removal is right with what we have now.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Commissioner Johnson?
Again, I'm going to be reiterating what everybody said, so I'll just save everyone. I was looking at it more from a safety standpoint, from the spalling brick and falling debris, but After reading that structural report, it sounds like a lot of that spalling brick we should try to repair it first before just, carte blanche taking off a third of it, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I think your safety point is a good note, though, that by denying this application, we are not encouraging the applicant to not repair it. We would like to see it repaired, and that demolition by neglect is not a situation we want to have arise here. And so we would want to see repairs move forward in the future, just not
advocate for repair instead of demolition.
Well, are there other comments, or would somebody like to make a motion?
This is Commissioner Howard. I'll make a motion of appropriateness to remove a portion of the chimney at 300 Washington Avenue South, Milwaukee Road Depot and Freight House.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Vandereyck.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. That motion passes. You may speak to staff about next steps tomorrow. The next item on our agenda is item number 5, 4736 DuPont Avenue South, Ward 13. This is a certificate of appropriateness. The staff report will be presented by Andrea Burke.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Andrea Burke, and I am the supervisor for the Historic Preservation Team in CPED. Next slide, please. I am presenting tonight the Certificate of Appropriateness application for the proposed window replacement project at 4736 DuPont Avenue South in the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District. Next slide, please. 4736 DuPont Avenue South is a 2.5-story brick residence designed in the classical revival style by Liebenberg, Kaplan, and Martin. It is located in the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District, which was recently designated by the City Council in July of this year. The existing windows are wood double-hung sashes with true divided lights, and it's my understanding that the home also has some existing replacement windows. Next slide, please. As part of the MAC Sound Insulation Program, MAC standing for Metropolitan Airports Commission, the applicant is proposing to replace 12 original windows, some with fiberglass and others with aluminum-clad wood, as well as replace 12 storm windows. Next slide, please. The 4 windows on the second story of the front elevation will be fiberglass double-hung windows with a simulated muntin. Next slide, please. The 2 windows on the second story side elevations at the front corners of the property will be aluminum clad wood double hung windows. Next slide, please. Remaining windows on the rear will be replaced with aluminum clad wood double hung windows. They are on the rear, and then there's also some that are on the rear addition, also sort of facing the sides, but generally in the rear. And then the last part of the scope of work is non-original storm windows will be replaced with aluminum storm windows. Next slide, please. It is important to note that the design work for the MAC program occurs well in advance of permitting at the city, and the applicant, it's my understanding, was nearly ready for permits prior to the interim protection being established in July of 2019, but hadn't applied for permits quite yet. The applicants opted to wait out the designation process before applying for their certificate of appropriateness. The MAC Sound Installation Program is a program that is out there to a number of residents in the metropolitan area, offering sound insulation, window replacement, interior insulation, and then in some cases HVAC improvements to properties that are within certain flight patterns of the airport that have increased noise. And the purpose of the program is to reduce the sound level in the house to, and there is an applicant, the applicant is here to speak and I'll let them do that, but I'm just sort of giving a quick overview, reduce the sound inside the home as the planes go over. Next slide, please. Removing character-defining features of a historic property that are not severely deteriorated are in conflict with the Secretary of the Interior Standards number 5 and 6, which are being used to evaluate this particular project, as design guidelines for this district have not been developed yet. The standards recommend repair over replacement, but are flexible. In this case, window deterioration is not necessitating the proposed replacement. Sound abatement is the primary reason. As such, staff is recommending that the applicants repair those windows that are most visible on the property, specifically those 4 windows on the front elevation and the 2 windows on the front side corners of the second story of the home, but allowing replacement of the windows on the rear to achieve compliance with the standards. Next slide, please. The Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the application by Miller Dunwoody, Kelly Maston for the property located at 4736 DuPont Avenue South in the Lyndhurst Residential Historic District, with the following conditions: that the 4 original wood windows on the front elevation of the property shall be repaired and not replaced, and the 2 original wood windows on the second floor of the side elevations shall be repaired and not replaced. Otherwise, the rest of the project is being recommended for approval. This concludes my presentation. The homeowners for the property are here to speak tonight, as well as the applicant, Miller Dunwoody, who is available for questions as I understand it. Thank you very much. I am available for questions as well.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions for staff? I don't see any questions at this time. So with that, I will open the public hearing. It looks like the applicant, I'm not sure, would the architect or the homeowner like to speak first? Kelly Maston, it looks like you're listed as the applicant. If you could press *6 to activate your microphone and then wait to hear the recorded message, and then we'll be able to hear you.
Hi, this is Kelly Maston with Miller Dunwoody Architecture. I will be turning it over to the homeowners, Ben and Liz, here soon, but I am available for any questions you have with the application. Tom Hoffus, the project manager for my office for the MAC Sound Abatement projects, is also available to handle any questions you may have about the sound abatement projects.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions for the architect? Don't see any at the moment. Oh, Commissioner Sandbolt.
Hi, I see that staff is recommending repairs to some of these windows in lieu of replacement. And I'd just like to hear if we do recommend repairs, what kind of repairs would meet the requirements that to abate the sound necessary?
There is refurbishment of existing windows. That is an option. However, the homeowner over a year ago, when they met with the contractor to discuss the options, did select to pick replacement windows. We know that from the purposes of sound abatement, replacing the windows does give you a higher probability of reducing the sound because you have more control over the different components of air movement. You'd be having an insulated glass panel in the window rather than a single pane of glass in addition to the storm window, so you're getting an extra layer of glass to help block the sound. And the rooms in question are the family's sleeping rooms, so they chose those rooms because it would have the most impact on their quality of life.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there additional questions for the applicant? Don't see at the moment. Did the homeowner wish to make a statement? If so, press *6 to activate your microphone.
Hi, this is Liz. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi, this is Liz Smith. I am the owner at 4736 DuPont Avenue South. I am going to reiterate some of the things that Kelly just said, but we purchased our home in 2018 and we're aware of all of the noise from the planes, but we planned on using the money from the MAC grant to replace the windows in the bedroom. The high level of noise really does keep us up at night. It wakes our kids. The window replacement is a quality of life issue, as Kelly also noticed or mentioned, excuse me. And we were planning on getting this fixed. It was part of the reason that we purchased the house, was hoping that, or knowing that we would be able to use this money until the study began. So the 6 windows in question are all in our family's second floor sleeping rooms, and that is the most important place for the sound abatement. We value our home's historic appearance. It is why we bought it. We intentionally did not include the first floor windows because we love their appearance and the noise doesn't make as big of a difference when we're in the dining room or the living room. We have been informed by the MAC project manager that reconditioning of our single pane windows will not be equal to the new replacement windows in terms of the noise reduction. The new airtight double pane windows plus the new storms is the best way to achieve the highest sound reduction. And according to Kelly, the current second floor storms are not original. They'd be replaced with flush mounted storms that more closely resemble the historic first floor windows. And the replacement of the primary windows, which is what's up for debate, I believe, will not noticeably alter the exterior appearance of the home because they are very close to the current windows and they would be behind the storms. My husband, who's not here, but I speak for both of us, would just like to emphasize that we love the historic characteristics of our home and our neighborhood. It's the reason we looked in this neighborhood and why we bought it. And we just want to resolve this quality of life issue in the best way possible, which in our opinion is replacing rather than repairing our bedroom windows. And just in response to something Andrea said, I actually don't know the answer to this, but we had this scheduled to actually them to be put in and were called and it was canceled maybe 2 or possibly 3 weeks. I didn't look back. So I'm surprised to hear that we didn't hear, I mean, before the installation is when the study started. So I'm surprised to hear that we didn't have the permits, but I don't necessarily have the full answer to that. So thanks for giving me the time to speak. And if you have any questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to try.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any questions for the homeowner? don't see any at this time. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Did Tom want to make a comment of his own, or was he just available for questions? Tom, are you there?
Hello, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm here to answer questions. Excuse me. I am project manager. I work for Miller Dunwoody Architecture in Minneapolis, along with Kelly. I'm the project manager on behalf of the MAC. So I'm here to answer any program questions that may be applicable to this application.
I guess I have a question. If we were to proceed with repairing the existing windows and then putting the new storm windows, I'm curious. I realize that it would not be as good as a new window with the new storm window. I'm curious if you've done any studies, how different would it be? Because the new storm window, I imagine, would cut down significantly.
The reconditioning process that we use, we put in jam liners, and all of these seals and gaskets are upgraded on the window sashes themselves, but it is still a single pane glass sash. And then we put a program approved acoustic rated storm window product on the exterior. The storm product would be the same regardless of which prime window is installed. But the difference, you cannot really compare the new windows were tested in the laboratory, and the combination of the new window plus the storm window is we're assured by the manufacturer will achieve an SDC rating of 40 or greater, which is the minimum standard for the sound insulation upgrades. Reconditioning of an existing window along with the acoustic storm would likely not reach 40 decibel or an SDC of 40. However, if every opening in the home were treated with reconditioning and an acoustic storm, we would still achieve a 5 decibel reduction of noise within the living spaces of the house on average metering. The current program does not perform any testing prior to reconditioning or after reconditioning. Earlier programs that were conducted by the MAC on behalf of the FAA program back in the early 2000s did perform pre and post testing, and we used the guidelines that were developed during those design and resulting tests to confirm that the modifications achieve the goal.
So it will be a noticeable decrease. It just won't be as noticeable of a decrease.
There will be a decrease in sound within the home with reconditioned windows and the new storm, but it will not be as significant a decrease as with a new window product on the prime window.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions that are related to the MAC program? I don't see any at this time. Thank you for your comments, Tom. I don't see anyone else listed in the queue, but if there is anybody else who wishes to speak for or against this application, again, if you could press *6 to activate your microphone and wait to hear the recorded message so we can hear you. If you could do so at this time. I don't see that there is anybody. So with that, I will close the public hearing and open this commission discussion. Concerns, comments on the proposed application? I know I sympathize with this issue. I also live in South Minneapolis, and if we hear a plane go over, you will notice on this call, because they sound like they're going to land right in the house. So I understand that this is a concern. I also understand where staff is coming from, because these windows look to be in relatively good condition, which is something we're always excited to see for historic windows. And that this puts it in a difficult place, especially since we don't have guidelines for this historic district yet. I'm curious to hear what other commissioners thought about this application. Somebody must have some thoughts on this.
This is Commissioner Howard. I'll chime in, just because everyone else is being quiet. I think that the conditions placed on this approval are a good compromise, and I do understand the frustration of airlines flying overhead. I'm not in a max zone, but I'm close enough that when the air is right, when the wind is right, we get our noise here too. So I understand that concern, but I do think that the compromise put in by the conditions makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there anyone else who'd wish to speak on this item?
I'll say I agree that I think this might be a good compromise. It's sad to see some original historic windows that are in good shape going away, but at the same time, I'm happy that we're going to be able to preserve some on the house, and also that there'll still be the storm and primary window configuration. To me, seems like a good compromise.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. I agree that this seemed like a good compromise that staff was proposing with the conditions, meeting the Secretary of Interior standards by concentrating on the primary facades, the part that's viewed from the street. I do wonder if there are other storm windows that could be utilized that would provide a better sound insulation, but I do not know in depth the MAC program, and I know that they did do research when they first started this, so I will assume that they have helped guide to the best storm windows possible for the situation. I wonder if there are other comments or if somebody would like to make a motion on this application.
This is
I'll go
Commissioner.
ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the certificate of appropriateness, including the conditions that were laid out in the agenda for the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there a second?
Howard will second.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there any further discussion? I don't see any at this time. So with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Van der Eyck,
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. The motion passes. I'd like to ask the applicant to talk to the staff tomorrow about their next steps. Our next item is number 6, 24 3rd Street North, Ward 3, Certificate of Appropriateness. The staff report will be presented by Andrea Burke.
Good evening again, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I am Andrea Burke and I am the supervisor for the Historic Preservation Team in CPED. Next slide, please. I am presenting tonight the Certificate of Appropriateness application for the proposed cornice and windowsill rebuilding project at 24 3rd Street North in the Warehouse Historic District. Next slide, please. The McKesson Building at 24 3rd Street North is a 6-story brick and stone building designed in the Renaissance Revival style by Warren H. Hayes. The building once featured 2 Bayfield sandstone cornice bands, one above the first floor and one below the top floor, as well as sandstone windowsills. Next slide, please. Photos from previous preservation applications show that the lower cornice was removed between 1997 and 1998, while the upper cornice was removed after 2008 by using a drill. Next slide, please. The windowsills were removed around the same time in a similar manner. These removals were undertaken without Heritage Preservation Commission or city approvals. The HPC did approve safety netting surrounding both cornices until a solution could be found for replacement of the cornices and the windowsills. Next slide, please. The applicant is before you today to replace the lower historic stone cornice with cast stone. Reinforced cast stone to match the existing stone in appearance, profile, size, color, and texture as closely as possible, and to replace the upper stone cornice with fiberglass cornice with a finish to match the existing stone, also in appearance, profile, size, color, and texture as closely as possible. Next slide, please. The applicant also proposes to patch deteriorated stone windowsills with a Jan restoration mortar or similar, or Dutchman patches of salvaged stone where possible. Next slide, please. The applicant cites lack of availability of the original material, the Bayfield sandstone, also known as Western Lake Superior sandstone, as well as public safety as the reasons for not using in-kind materials. Next slide, please. Staff received one comment letter in support of the proposed scope of work. A unique regional project of its time, the original Bayfield sandstone cornices, as well as many of the sills were intentionally removed in the recent past, which severely altered the design, materials, and workmanship of the building. They were distinctive architectural features of this building, and any proposed replacement should match in kind unless the material is not readily available. The applicant states that the Bayfield sandstone is not easily obtained and has therefore proposed fiberglass and cast stone. Next slide, please. Fiberglass is not an appropriate replacement material for decorative sandstone. Therefore, the proposed project does not meet the warehouse design guidelines under general guidance, roofs and parapets, and fenestration. Cast stone may be appropriate provided the stone matches the historic Bayfield sandstone in size, massing, color, and profile, and match as closely as possible in texture and finish. With that, the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt staff findings for the application by Casey Bradford of New History for the property located at 24 3rd Street North in the Minneapolis Warehouse Historic District, and recommends that the HPC approve the certificate of appropriateness to rebuild the stone cornices with fiberglass and cast stone at the northwest and south facades, and to repair this and replace the stone windowsills with cast stone at the northwest and south facades, subject to the following conditions. 1, the upper and lower Bayfield sandstone cornices shall be replaced with cast stone that matches the historic Bayfield sandstone cornices in size, massing, color, and profile, and shall match as closely as possible in texture and finish. Fiberglass is not permitted. And 2, the windowsill shall be repaired with the yawn mortar, and only those sills that are severely deteriorated or currently missing shall be replaced with cast stone that matches the historic Bayfield sandstones sills in size, massing, color, and profile, and shall match as closely as possible in texture and finish. This concludes my presentation. The applicant, New History, is here to give a presentation for their client, the owner of the building, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions for staff? Don't see any questions at this time. So with that, I will open the public hearing. It sounds like the applicant, Casey Radford, is here to speak. If you could press *6 on your phone to activate your microphone and wait to hear the recorded message so that we can hear you, and then state your name and address for the record.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, Casey Radford, 575 9th Street Southeast, Suite 215, Minneapolis, 55414. First, I would just like to say that we cannot speak to past projects or work that have occurred, as none of this current team or building ownership were involved, but we can speak to this application being discussed tonight and how the current owners are trying to do the right thing now by replacing the missing cornice with substitute materials per the standards. So with that, thank you all for your review of the project and for hearing us tonight. I would like to introduce myself and team. I am a director at New History and also a licensed architect who specializes in historic buildings and materials. I also served on the St. Paul HPC for about 4 years, just recently ending my term in the last month due to a move out of the city. New History was engaged by the new property manager and the next generation of ownership within the past year to maintain and restore the building by advising on appropriate repairs for the cornices, sills, and other masonry on the building. I am joined by Cynthia Schultz of Acre Real Estate, representing the ownership group, and Tom Miller of Advanced Masonry Restoration, who is the mason doing the work. They're both here tonight and also available for questions that come up from the commission. So I have some slides to run through, and I will do that now. And I honestly can't even see if they're up there, so I'm just gonna keep going. So tonight I will present the masonry rehabilitation work related to the cornices and windowsills specifically at the McKesson building, located in the warehouse district, as Andrea mentioned. I will review the guiding principles for the design of the repairs and then go through the decision process for the material we've selected. We are asking that the first condition be modified to also allow for FRP, a substitute material, to be allowed for use as the replacement material at the upper cornice only due to safety considerations, and are happy to accept the condition for the lower cornice and sills as written. Next slide, please. So in addition to the warehouse district design guidelines, we also use the Secretary of the Interior standards. We reviewed the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties with guidelines for preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstructing historic buildings. Then we also reviewed the Technical Preservation Services guide on brick, stone, terracotta, concrete, adobe, stucco, and mortar for building exterior masonry. And finally, we followed Preservation Brief 16, the use of substitute materials on historic building exteriors, which guided us to our selected materials of both cast stone and FRP for the cornices and the sills. I should say cast stone for the lower cornice and sills, and FRP for the upper cornice. In addition to the published documents, the project team also strongly considered safety. We worked with the mason and structural engineer to develop repair methods that are safe for installation, given the height and location of the upper cornice and the difficulties with installing heavy materials such as cast stone and real stone. Next slide, please. So in review of the Minneapolis Warehouse District Design Guidelines 2.9, replacement with a substitute material will be considered if the form and design of the substitute material is proven durable and also conveys the visual appearance of the original material. Standard 6 of the Secretary of the Interior standard states Deteriorated historic features shall be repaired rather than replaced. Where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of a distinctive feature, the new feature shall match the old in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities, and, where possible, materials. Replacement of missing features shall be substantiated by documentary, physical, or pictorial evidence. And within the technical preservation services, brick, stone, terracotta, concrete, adobe, stucco, and mortar, building exterior masonry guide, the recommended treatments include repair may also include the limited replacement in kind or with compatible substitute material of those extensively deteriorated or missing parts of masonry features, and also replacing in kind an entire masonry feature that is too deteriorated to repair if the overall form and detailing are still evident, using the physical evidence as a model to reproduce the feature. Examples can include large sections of a wall, a cornice, balustrade, column, or stairway. If using the same kind of material is not technically or economically feasible, then a compatible substitute material may be considered. So similar to the standards, this document does also allow for the use of compatible material for building elements, including cornices, which is what we are asking for. Next slide, please. Preservation Brief 16, the use of substitute materials on historic building exteriors, discusses the use of fiber reinforced polymers, FRP and fiberglass as a substitute material. Fiberglass is a non-load bearing material attached to a separate structural frame. In the case of McKesson, we are proposing a stainless steel frame for durability and longevity. It is also used when a lightweight element is needed or in inaccessible locations, which we are up against here at the McKesson building for the 6th level cornice. Fiberglass can be molded into any shape and can resemble many materials such as stone. The guidelines within the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, within that document, FRP is also described as a substitute material in locations where recreating missing or deteriorated features is necessary. Next slide, please. So technically, the NPS does give us the option to do nothing and retain the cornices as they are, but our team would instead like to restore historic integrity to the building by repairing and reconstructing the cornice. And I will run through now how we selected our proposed substitute materials. Our first option, replace in kind, was considered first, obviously. The original stone, Bayfield brownstone, is no longer quarried and has not been since 1910. Next to that, salvage stone would be the next best option. The use of salvage stone is difficult because of the sizes needed and availability of the required quantity of material. The size of the cornice is large. Salvage pieces would need to be larger so that they can be carved to fit the right profile. So there is just a lack of available materials that fit the right size for this particular project. Next, we consider replacement with a similar material, such as cast stone. Cast stone can be used to replicate the appearance of stone. It is proposed currently at the 2nd level cornice and also the windowsills, where it can be safely installed. For this particular project, public safety is a primary concern at the upper level cornice due to the difficult installation requirements. The swing stage that will be used to do the repairs on the cornice is unable to support stone over 200 pounds, which is about 30 inches in length for the size of stone required. Tom might have to correct me if I'm wrong on my numbers there. The structural connection to support the stone is also significant enough that there is concern with the ability for the crew to safely handle the stone and put in place with the proper attachment, which is a severe, not severe, it's a significant concern when you're 6 levels up in the air. When the building was constructed, the cornice could be accessed from the interior and exterior and constructed from bottom up. Therefore, the attachment and installation methods were much different than what is required today in order to replace the existing stone with a cast stone or salvage stone if it was available. The back portion of the existing stone will be retained in place as the means for providing the structural connection to the cast stone. And also for the fiberglass cornice as well. As licensed professionals, public health and safety are our first priority. Therefore, we researched the lighter weight options for the upper cornice where there were safety concerns for installation. So following those options, we had to consider lighter weight substitute materials where we had to deal with safety considerations. So we looked at sheet metal, which is not appropriate in our mind due to the sheen and inability to provide a close color match. Wood is also not appropriate in this situation as it is not durable and also does not provide for the appearance of stone, and generally should not be in contact with masonry in an exterior application. Fiberglass then was selected as the best option for the 6-level cornice because it is recommended by the National Park Service Preservation Brief 15 and is a lightweight option that can be more easily installed. It can be custom produced to mimic the appearance of the original stone and color and can be extruded into any profile. It can be safely installed. It can mimic the appearance of the original stone and color. It can be extruded into any profile. The cost of fiberglass is comparable to real stone. The separate stainless steel supporting frame will help tie it together. The back portion of the stone will be retained in place, and flashing will be provided at the top of the cornice to manage water. This solution of fiberglass was not a cost-driven material selection. The cost of fiberglass is comparable to real stone and cast stone, but is easier to install from that standpoint. Mock-ups will be prepared to ensure the color matches the existing cornices, and we are more than happy to work with the city staff in the mock-up process to make sure that we get to the right color and profile and texture. The window sill repair was designed following the same preservation brief and decision process. The stone is no longer quarried. The source of salvage stone is not reliable, and therefore we will be patching the sills where possible using yawn restoration, mortar patching, and we will only replace where absolutely necessary with cast stone to match the existing sills. So in response to the staff report, we are asking that the first condition be modified to allow cast stone at the lower cornice and fiberglass at the upper cornice as substitute replacement materials, with a condition that both materials match the historic Bayfield cornice in size, massing, color, and profile, and shall match as closely possible in texture and finish. And again, we are happy to add a condition that allows for city staff to be included in the approval of cornice mock-ups for both the upper and the lower cornice. This new generation of ownership, property manager, and our entire team are working to restore historic integrity and maintain the McKesson building. Repointing is already underway on the east facade, which was reviewed and approved by a certificate of no change. And the project team would like to order materials now so they can start getting everything ready to do the actual cornice work next spring. And I think that's everything. So thank you, staff, chair, and commission for your time tonight. And are there any questions?
Thank you for your comments. I guess I'd like to clarify the safety concerns with the upper level cornice, but I'm wondering if that's a better question for Tom. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Tom can probably talk better to the actual installation methods than I can, so.
Okay. I will hold my question then. Are there any questions for the applicant? I don't see any at this time. Did Cynthia wish to speak? Did she have a statement too?
No, I think she's just there for questions.
Okay.
But we can have Tom speak to the installation method question that you have.
Okay. Yeah, Tom, if you wouldn't mind speaking a bit to the installation and the concern with the upper cornice, because I'm noticing it's right below the windows. So I guess I'm wondering what the access. I realize you'd still need a swing stage, but how the installation would go. Tom, if you could press *6, and then you should get a little pre-recorded message, and then you can speak.
right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the cornice section, to put it on with cast stone, there's a weight restriction I have on my equipment. We have to go to significantly smaller and shorter pieces, which literally would be 18 inches long, which would not even look close to what the original building looked like. The second concern is I've got to take these pieces and slide them from a deck into a opening that is only 12 inches high, and these pieces are front heavy. It's just almost impossible to do using a swing stage. The stone on the bottom is a lot easier because we can have a forklift down there to maneuver the stone for the guys on the crew. And that's a big reason for the light material.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for anyone on the team? I don't see any at this time. So with that, I'll check to see if there's anyone else wishing to speak for or against this application. If you could just press *6, wait to hear the recorded message, and then give us your name and address for the record. I don't see there being any other people in the queue. So with that, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, let's discuss. Are there any concerns, comments about the proposed application? I guess I can start out by commenting. I remember when this kind of first came on our radar after, I think that with the previous owner and the destruction of the cornice. And so I'm glad to see that they are trying to move forward with these repairs. I understand staff's concerns with the fiberglass material. I generally agree that it is not typically an appropriate repair material. On the other hand, I do understand the constructability issues that they would be running into at this location. And so wanting to make sure that our conditions are feasible as well. I don't know if any other commissioners have thoughts on that. Maybe somebody who has used fiberglass. Commissioner Howard.
I personally haven't been involved in a project that uses fiberglass, but I have seen it successfully used on upper stories. And so I understand the conditions as written, but I also know that, 5 stories up, 6 stories up, and this is between the 5th and 6th floor. It's not going to be as noticeable from the ground level. So I guess a question for city staff is, if we were to modify this to allow fiberglass on the upper cornice only, would you be open to having mock-ups to review and approve so that we can get the best finish visually as possible?
Yes, we would be open to that.
Great.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on this application? I know I've looked at using fiberglass, but I've just never had a project that has actually gone through using it.
There are some pretty famous examples in New York, but again, that's much higher stories.
Yeah.
But still, 5 to 6 stories up, someone walking by, the visual is going to be close.
Yeah, I would agree that I'm less concerned about the upper cornice because from the ground, I don't think you're going to really, as long as the mock-up looks good, I don't think you're really going to be able to tell. Anyone else have thoughts on this application? Or perhaps somebody would like to make a motion altering staff conditions.
Since everyone is so talkative tonight, I'll just keep talking. This is where, if we were in the actual city council room, I'd be looking down the dais going, come on, somebody, speak up. So I guess I will make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness to stone cornices with fiberglass and cast stone at the northwest and south facades, to repair and replace stone windowsills with cast stone at the northwest and south facades, subject to the following conditions. And I would rewrite the first one as follows. The upper and lower cornices shall match the historic Bayfield sandstone cornices in size, massing, color, profile, and shall match as closely as possible in texture and finish. Fiberglass is only permitted on the upper cornice. It is not permitted on the lower cornice. Mock-ups shall be prepared for review and approval by city staff. And then the other conditions as written, 2, 3, and 4 in the agenda. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. Staff, does that seem sufficient?
Yeah, I'm just taking notes here. I've got basically mostly the conditions should mostly be the same, except instead of the fiberglass shall not be permitted, it will be fiberglass is only permitted on the upper cornice and not the lower cornice. Mock-ups will be provided for review and approval by staff. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that works.
All right.
I'm not usually the one that rewrites conditions. That would be Chair Sandberg, who usually.
I'm not allowed to do it anymore. Gotta put it on somebody else now.
Well, I tried.
I think that makes sense. Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Is there a second?
Sandbolt, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there any further discussion? I don't see any. So with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on the motion.
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Vander Eyck.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. The motion passes. You may speak to staff tomorrow about next steps. Our next item is number 7, 1500 Jackson Street Northeast, the National Register nomination for Northrop King and Company Complex, Ward 1. The staff report will be presented by Rob Skalecki.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rob Skalecki. I'm a city planner in the Historic Preservation section of CPED. Today I'm presenting a National Register of Historic Places nomination for CLG HBC comment. The property is the Northrop King and Company complex located at 1500 Jackson Street Northeast. Next slide, please. The property was part of the survey area for the 2004 Northeast Minneapolis Historic Resources Inventory by Mead and Hunt, and the complex was recommended eligible for listing in the National Register under Criteria A. The property was also recommended eligible for local designation under Criteria 1 for its association with business and industry in Northeast Minneapolis, and for the important contributions made to the commercial seed industry by Northrop King and Company. And the property was recommended for local designation under Criterion 4 as an intact example of an early 20th century manufacturing complex that exemplifies the manufacturing process. In July 2020, CPED staff completed a historic review letter request for the parcel and determined the property to be a historic resource. Next slide, please. The subject property is a single irregular shaped parcel, approximately 11 acres in area, which includes 6 contributing buildings that show multiple additions and 1 contributing structure that is made of 12 reinforced concrete silos. The collection of buildings are between 1 and 6 stories in height. They're constructed of wood, brick, concrete, and steel elements. The resources were constructed between 1916 and 1947 as the Northrop King and Company complex, with the first buildings being constructed on the site between 1916 and 1919 by local contractors, the Barnett and Record Company. Next slide, please. The period of significance for the property begins in 1916, when the first building was constructed, and ends in 1976, when the company was sold. The nomination states that the Northrop King and Company complex is historically significant under National Register Criteria A for industry for its contribution to the seed trade in the 20th century. The subject property holds significance as the office and manufacturing space for the Northrop King and Company, which grew to become the country's largest wholesale seed facility. The company began in 1884 as the Northrop Brassland and Company with a retail store located at 22 Hennepin Avenue. The Northrop King and Company was incorporated in 1896 by Jesse Northrop, Preston King, and Charles Massey. Due to the development of the Postal Service and the growth of transportation at the time, mail order seed companies like Northrop King experienced expansive growth. The construction of the subject complex at the Great Northern and Northern Pacific rail lines at the current site for the growing company coincided with the outbreak of the Great War, which altered the world's food economy. Northrop King and Company were the country's only full-service seed company at the time, when the United States had previously depended on Europe for about 90% of all seeds for many common vegetables and flowers. After World War I, the company underwent a second stage of construction at the parcel to facilitate growth, and World War II fully cut off all European and Japanese seed supply, and the company was forced to increase supply and production once again and constructed additional buildings with that. By 1950, the company had expanded on research and production initiatives and included 12 branch production sites in the Midwest, with 23 other divisions located throughout the country. By 1963, the company had 1,200 full-time employees, with more than half of those working in Minneapolis, and the company's sales were an estimated $40 million that year. Next slide, please. The Northrop King and Company complex retains its historic integrity and is able to convey its significance and association to agriculture production in the 20th century. The buildings and structure retain integrity of location and setting. Next slide, please. Integrity of design, workmanship, materials are all intact, and there's sufficient integrity shown in the interior and exterior to convey the property's significance and communicate the site's history as a 20th century industrial complex. Next slide, please. With that, staff recommends that the Heritage Preservation Commission adopt CPED's report, approve the National Register nomination for the Northrop King and Company complex located at 1500 Jackson Street Northeast, and direct staff to transmit a letter summarizing the report to the State Historic Preservation Officer. I am available and very willing to hear all your comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions for staff? Don't see any questions at the moment. I was really excited to see, I'm always excited to see a National Register nomination come forward. And just a slightly different take on the agricultural history in this local area was just, I don't know, it's always exciting to learn something new about it. Commissioners, I'm wondering if anybody has any comments, thoughts on this application?
I'll speak. Again, happy to see this come forward. It is a beautiful site. I love shopping up there at the art stores that are in there now. So glad to see this coming forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Is there anyone else? I feel like I should just start calling on people. It'll be like you're in school, forcing people to talk.
I'll speak up. I agree. I'm excited to see that this one's coming through. I think it's a great facility, and there's a lot of character left in this building. So it's great to see that it's moving forward. And I'm also happy to know that the building has a current use, and that use has been very compatible with the historic building. And I feel like it's a good relationship there that they have. I was kind of interested in the period of significance extending all the way to 1976. I feel like when we review some of the other applications that come through for changes, I feel like that wider, longer period of significance is sometimes complicated. A lot of the things that get added in those later years are sometimes of materials that aren't necessarily easy to maintain. So I was kind of interested in that. I think that would be my only concern. That being said, I do believe that the history of the building, some of the things that changed over those 60 some years that it was in service are probably important features to maintain. I just know that the materiality and kind of the construction quality of things that happened probably in the last 20 to 30 years of its life as in its phase one of life are probably going to be hard to maintain. So some concern there, but generally I think the application is good.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. I guess maybe that kind of directs to staff. Rob, do you foresee any possible issues with the length of the period of significance? Any changes that we think they might want to return to or not return to based on that?
Don't know if I'll be able to fully comment on that, but it's definitely something I can include as a top concern from the commission in the letter to the SHPO, just for their reference when that goes to the nomination review board.
Thank you. I think it is a good point, because we have run into some where a later owner then decides they want to try to change something, and we run into issues with the period of significance. It does occasionally happen. So I think that is a good comment for them. Somebody else, it sounds like, wanted to talk earlier, but I don't know who that was. It didn't pop up on my screen in time.
I was just going to echo the same things. Super excited to see this. Absolutely support it, and appreciate that it's in use and feels very effective right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Are there any other comments? Or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the CPED report, approve the National Register nomination for the Northrop King and Company complex located at 1500 Jackson Street Northeast, and we direct staff to transmit a letter summarizing the report to the State Historic Preservation Officer.
Thank you, Commissioner Sandbolt. Is there a second?
Bjornberg seconds.
Thank you, Commissioner Bjornberg. Is there any further discussion? I don't see any. So with that, would the clerk please call the roll on the motion?
Bjornberg.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Howard.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Sandbolt.
Aye.
Vandereyk.
Aye.
Sundberg.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas.
Thank you. The motion passes. That concludes our public hearing items. Commissioners or staff, are there any announcements or new commission business to discuss? Andrea Burke.
Yeah, thank you. As I've mentioned the previous two meetings, just the recruitment period, but the open vacancy period for applications to be a commissioner on the HPC has been extended until November 1st. I have done some recruiting myself and some calls and some emails I've sent out, but just a reminder to anyone, if they know anybody who's interested, to reach out to candidates and encourage them to apply to sit on the commission. Like I said, that deadline was extended until November 1st, but that's probably the latest we can extend it, as we will need to get these the open seats filled before current commissioners' terms expire at the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Any other items, commissioners? Doesn't seem like there's anything. I guess, Andrea, I actually have a question. Have we heard anything further from the St. Paul HPC after their initial outreach wanting to do a meet and greet with us?
I have not heard anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody's busy. Well, if there are no other items, we've completed all the items on the agenda for this meeting. So there being no other business this meeting, if not and without objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned. The next regular meeting of the HPC is October 27th, 2020. Thank you, everyone.